So folks, we had a quick meeting glitch, but what we were starting to do was just introduce each other. This is CJ from Vermont, flying a 180 and a 260B. Dave Gittleman, you had just started to talk when the meeting did something strange.
Yeah, okay, I have a 180 Comanche. I'm in Spruce Creek, which is near Daytona Beach, Florida. And that's about it from here. It's nice and warm.
This is Rick Bima. We fly a Comanche 260C. We're in the Dallas area.
This is John Futter. I have a 260C. I'm in Orange, Mass. And I am wondering if I had gone on a cruise to Alaska with Dave Gittleman once upon a time.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Around 1989 or 90.
Yeah, right. It was a fun trip.
It was.
Hi, this is David House, and I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm calling from Australia. I have a 260C, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to be on the call, but I'm looking forward to learning more.
You are welcome, and welcome, Dave. You're probably winning the award for the farthest away. Thanks for being here.
Shouldn't be too hard, but yeah, thank you for having me.
Gary Woodbridge here. I've got a 1960 260 or 250. Wish it was a 260. I'm in Guthrie, Oklahoma.
So anyways, I'm Stefan. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. I've had a PA 24 250, 1958, serial number 304 for about 12 years. I love it.
My name is Coleman. I bought a 400. It's a November 400 Golf Charlie last July, and headed up in the avionics shop for a while. Had a couple of 750s and PXIs installed in a 55X autopilot, and got it back in January, and have managed to put about 45 hours on it so far.
But I'm Jim Barry. I have a PA-30B turbo.
Hi, this is Pat Kiefer. I have a PA-39, normally aspirated airplane currently flying across the screen.
A little turbulence, huh?
A little turbulence, yes. It's 15 gusting to 30, I believe.
Hey, CJ, this is Donnie.
Yeah, this is Eric.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey, is that Donnie from the Red Sox?
Yes, it is.
Yay. You want to tell them where you're from and what you fly?
I'm from Quincy, Massachusetts. I fly a PA 24 250. So far, I'm like everybody else. I'm not flying anywhere near as much as I'd like to.
Well said. Hunter, you want to pop in for a sec?
Well, this is Murray. I live right up the road from Donnie in Temple, New Hampshire, and fly a PA 24 250 out of Nashville.
Well, I'm just going to start calling on people. Hunter Newsirk, you want to tell them who you are and where you are and what you fly?
Hey, what's going on? I'm from Dallas, Texas, and here, I guess I'll flip the camera around if I can figure out how to do it, and show you. Here's my plane right here.
Kristen Winter, PA 30, Minnesota.
Welcome, Kristen. Thank you for being here.
John Fuller, Minden, Nevada, and Palo Alto, California, PA 39.
And Elmer Creech, you've been here all along. If you can.
Yeah, I was early. Hello, everyone. I'm from Delaware, as in Bear, Delaware, and I have a PA 24260 B model, probably the first B model. It's 4301. I don't know where 4300 is. But anyway, great to be with you.
Let's see, Captain John, that is intriguing, and we would love to hear from you. And you'll probably need to press your, oh, there you are. You're allowed.
That's John McGowan.
All right, John Burnett, Millington, Tennessee. I've got a PA 24 250, a 1959 model, and I also fly a Cessna 170. And I am a retired pilot for FedEx. And Pete, I like your COVID protection there.
Yep, it works.
This is Eric Woods. Can anybody hear me?
Loud and clear, Eric.
Yeah, I'm down in the DC area in the flight restricted zone. I have a PA 24 250 1960 and a 1970 Cessna 150.
Oh, you get to fly in the fun places. Welcome, Eric. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I may as well introduce myself. Tom Marino. I'm in Massachusetts, Sturbridge. I'm new. I just bought my first Comanche in January at 250.
Congratulations.
So thanks. Got a lot to learn.
Great choice. Great choice.
You already learned enough to know you should pick a Comanche, Tom. Welcome to the game.
Oh, I love it so far. I just wish we didn't have we have constant turbulence in the Northeast so far this year. It's horrid. So
Weather's improving, trust me.
Yeah, I'm Steve. I have a 1960 PA 24 180 6.5 Papa or 8.5 Papa, and I'm down for an interior, which I'm doing myself, and I do not recommend anybody do that.
No.
And welcome, Steve. And for all of you, Steve Ells was recognized by Mike Bush in Manifesto and will be presenting in the future on, because he's very current on condition-based maintenance, and he's agreed to come and talk to us. So if Ells says he can take it to the bank is the general feedback. Thanks for being here, Steve.
I actually had to ask Mike to send me a copy of the book because I'm not written about in many books. I wanted to get a copy.
Well, he's a continental guy, Mike Bush.
That's why we got Steve talking to us and not Mike.
Right.
Hey, we're smart. We fly Comanches.
Hello.
This Chris?
That Chris, yep.
Hi, Chris from Detroit, just north of Detroit, Michigan. I fly a 260A model 65.
The original and still the best. Welcome.
I sure do like mine.
Oh, John and Deborah Westerfield from North Alabama. We have a PA 24 also.
Hey, CJ, it's Greg Peel. Hey, thanks, CJ. I'm Greg Peel. I am about 85% into a total restoration of a 1959 250. I'm in St. Peters. I live in St. Petersburg, but the airport is Zephyr Hill, ZPH. And hopefully in about 3 or 4 months, she'll be airworthy again after 18 years.
Way to go. 18 years. I am so excited. This is wonderful. Anybody, we're going to be trying to put together a group of people that are restoring these airplanes because all of these airframes were zinc chromate dipped prior to assembly, and they're not making them anymore. And at the moment, there's more money to be made, unfortunately, from some people parting them out, but obviously they're irreplaceable. So Greg, thank you for what you're doing. And there's quite a few people that are bringing airplanes back. And so we'll be trying to put together a group of people that are doing that so that y'all can find each other and so we can learn from you.
And this is Mark from San Diego. I have a 72 PA 39 Federal Twin Comanche.
A lot of 39s on tonight. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
And this is Harrison from Memphis. I have a 67 PA 30.
Welcome, Harrison. Memphis is cool.
Hey, Steve Flaherty out in El Paso, PA 24 260 1969.
And Steve Lewis from Carson City, Nevada, flying a PA 30, serial number 119.
Chris Burnley from Belmont, California, flying a 68 260B.
And folks, you can see that Comanche in the background of Chris Burnley's screen. That is the famous Dr. Bob Fox's Comanche that Chris Burnley swooped up. And Chris, you got great taste. Welcome back.
Yeah, I traded up from, I had a 59 250 and just sold it last week, and been carrying 2 planes for a while, and now I'm down to 1. So.
And 2 Comanches. That's impressive. Welcome.
That's as bad as Gloria.
Gloria's trying to get on. I got a message from her with her 180 and 260B.
Was this your idea, DJ, doing all this?
It was kind of a bunch of people that sort of came to a consensus, and we are the brick and mortar group, so we figured we would try to help it, but I'm not going to take credit. This is the brainchild of myself, Pat Donovan, and a couple of other people that said, if we're going to be canceling all of our fly-ins, i.e. Sun and Fun, and then Oshkosh, well, heck, why don't we just take all those sessions that we put together and all that great information and all these amazing presenters. You know, we're all sort of stuck in lockdown, and some of us are dealing with the small business effects of COVID, so why not get together in a cheaper way? So here we are.
You know, I could give a lot of advice on how to polish an airplane. I can do that.
Oh my gosh, Rick, welcome. You want to tell them about your beautiful 400?
Well, it's just that I'm not flying it. If I'm not flying it, I'm polishing it. That's all there is to it.
Rick Mascari's 400, that's Rick that was just talking, is famous. It's a Lindy Gold, it's Oshkosh Grand Champion, and champion of everything else. But the key thing about that airplane is it is actually the secret weapon of anybody because it is so brightly polished that it reflects all of the light sent at it. So in reality, it's a cartoon laser generator. We know about you, Rick.
You know about me. Huh? I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I hope you can. This work that I'm going to describe was actually done some time ago, 13 years ago. Presentation was only made once, but the information is sufficiently important and very current that I think everyone should hear what I have to say and look at what has been done. This work was rather substantial, and it was in response to SAIB, followed later on with a Piper service letter. Now, this particular presentation is on my website, hdneubert.com. So even if you can't see it today, you can certainly go to your laptop or computer and look it up later. The SAIB was issued by the FAA September 15th. It's not mandatory, it's only advisory, but it came about by Mike Rohr in Altus Aircraft Repair, who's no longer in business, by the way. But Mr. Rohr was hell-bent on getting an AD issued on the corrosion of the torque tube, and he misrepresented himself to the FAA as a technical advisor, which was wrong. He was even sending SDR, service difficulty reports, to the FAA based on someone else's evaluation. The SDRs go into a database that the FAA maintains, and they look at those every so often to see what the problems are in the industry. Mr. Rohr was just a little out of line, I think. Nevertheless, in order to respond to that SAIB, this presentation covers the work that was done to prove otherwise, that it is not a problem. The SDR database had 7 cases in January 95 of tube corrosion. The non-public ASAP database, which the FAA maintains, is private. It's private to the FAA. There are 45 cases were showing up. Now, of the ASAP database, 19 of the 26 most recent reports were submitted by Mr. Rohr. So again, we had somebody that was causing difficulty for everyone. Now, the corrosion, which is basically rust, has been observed between the torque tube and the attaching bolts, and those are covered by service letters. Those bolts are now all been replaced by corrosion-resistant bolts. These bolts are the ones that are that go through the stabilator yoke fittings into the torque tube. Now, if you've looked at your Comanche real close, you'll see that water can actually get into those holes, coat the torque tube with water or snow or whatever, and that's how that corrosion actually started. So the people with the most corrosion probably did not hangar their airplanes, because water can get in there, into the stabilator. So I took the action to take a look at that SAIB and do some homework first to see if we have a problem or not. One of the things I did was we did a survey of all the major shops that deal with Comanches. And you can see on the list, there's 9 shops, and they all gave their testimonials. Basically, the end result was, we see some corrosion, but it's not all that bad. And now to look at this corrosion, you have to take the stabilators off, and everyone should know that. Now, when Dale Vandiver managed the website, he did a survey, and basically only 1% reported significant corrosion, and it was mitigated. 25% minor corrosion and mitigated. When you do have corrosion on the torque tube, the way you mitigate it, at least one way, is there are a couple of products on the market. I'm looking at one made by Loctite. It's a spray-on coating, and it says Extended Rust Neutralizer, converts light rust to printable surfaces. That's fairly new. Another vendor that deals with car restorations is Eastwood, and they have a 2-stage process. One is to convert the iron oxide, which is rust, into another element or compound, and then you put another coating on after you clean that off to protect the surface. So that's how you mitigate it. Another way, of course, is Scotch-Brite pads. When you're all done with that, you might want to get some wet and dry 400 grit paper with oil and just do a shoe shine polish on the torque tube. So there are ways to do that, and it's not all that difficult.
Hans, this is CJ. Your screen share failed, so Pete Morse is sharing your slides, and so to keep up with your talk, if you could say next slide and say your current slide heading, that will help.
Oh, okay. This slide was initial survey results. This is going to be samples of torque tube and bolt corrosion. And the photograph on the left shows a torque tube that's awfully rusty, and that one is going to need some work to get that rust off. The photograph on the right shows the AN5 bolts corrode, and the reason for that, it's called galvanic corrosion, because the bolt attaches to aluminum and to steel, and the bolt is steel, and you'll see that the bolts act as an anode, and they corrode in the middle of the bolt, which is not really good. The load goes down because the area is reduced. In my opinion, there's not a lot of data how long it takes to get a bolt to look like that. But I would guess you should think about replacing those bolts every 10 years, just because of the galvanic corrosion that occurs. And that's true with the Piper horn, and I would expect it to be true with the Australian horn. Next slide. Some more samples of torque tube corrosion. On the picture on the left, the assembly came out of the airplane. It's sitting on a tabletop. In this case, if you look real closely on that picture, the inboard yoke of the stabilizer has been unbolted because they could not get that stabilizer off with that much corrosion on the torque tube. So when you have that much corrosion, you unbolt the inboard yoke, save the hardware, and then the stabilizer will come off. Picture on the right just shows an end view of that, and the tube is corroded on the inside as well as the outside. Next slide. Now, at that time, I hope I pronounced his name correct, Skip Dykema was president of ICS, and he got with Mike Rohr and said, if this is a problem, send an assembly to me. So I got it. It looked pretty bad. There's some pictures coming up, and I put it in our grit blast chamber. I did all this when I had a day job, so had little access to stuff. Anyway, it was 180 grit aluminum oxide. As I was taking all the rust off using the grit media, I could see even the CAD plating disappear. Then I made some very precision measurements using the gauges in the quality control room. Then I just put rattle can zinc chromate on, and then later on I painted the rest of the assembly just to dull it up a little bit. And that's the way it's been sitting in my hangar for 13 years. Then in order to do a test, there was a lot of machine work that we had to do in order to get this thing set up in the test fixture. Next slide. This is what it looked like when I got it. Left-hand side, or left picture is right-hand side is received. Not terribly, the rust is not terribly thick, but it was there, and the rust is significant. And the left-hand side, the right-hand picture, equally true. There was a lot of rust. This assembly was deemed unserviceable by Altus. Now, it was never discovered how he was able to replace this unserviceable unit or assembly with something that was serviceable. That was never discovered. Nevertheless, this is the specimen that I got and I still have, and this is what was used for testing purposes. Next slide. I took some very surface pitting after cleanup is the title. Some close-up pictures showed that the torque tube was rather pitted. My original assumption was, boy, that's not looking too good, but I used it anyway. So this is before the zinc chromate was on. Next slide. I'm not going to read everything here to you, but these are all the measurements I made. The Piper drawing outside diameter at the bottom of this spreadsheet is 2.3115 plus 3/10 minus 2/10. And the overall diameter measurements that I made is 2.3108 plus or minus 1.6 mils. So it was slightly undersized. And I think the undersize is the chromate coating on the torque tube was taken off, and that was enough to do it, to make these differences in diameters. Next slide. Now, in order to conduct the test, I did a survey of all the models to get maximum torque on the test specimen. And I finally decided that the C models with a higher gross weight, forward CG limit of 89.6, would give me the highest torque to be applied to the test specimen. Next slide. Load conditions. I did an aerodynamic evaluation, and let's see, the tail down load turns out to be 1,753 pounds at design limit load, which is 3.8 Gs load limit on the airplane. And under CAR 3, Part 23, the requirement is the maximum limit load on the control wheel is 200 pounds. Now, I think you have to be pretty darn strong to get 200 pounds, but maybe some people do. So the combination is 200 pounds on the cables, on the control wheel, the cables that attach to the control arm on the assembly, equals 5,600 inch-pounds. So now what we have is the torque on the torque tube assembly is 5,600 inch-pounds in torsion, inch-pounds in torsion, and 1,753 pounds in bending. And that offset from the torque tube is 3.2 inches. That will give you the combination that I just spoke about. And this condition covers all single models except the 400. So this is where I've now established the load conditions to say this is design limit load. And design limit load, of course, is the maximum load you'll ever experience in flight. This load, if we do it at 42% semi-span, the bending moment and the shear load are correct at the root. If this was a wing, this would be on the spar right as it enters the fuselage. The stabilator is a symmetrical wing. At 42 semi-span, that's a singular point. We can introduce the load and it will give you the correct combination at the root. We did the load testing in 3 increments. Load set 1 was 3.8 Gs, 0 to 3.8 Gs, back to 0 in 20% increments. Then we cycled it to design limit loads 100 times. That was the plan. It actually turned out to be 105, but the plan was to cycle that assembly to design limit load 100 times. Now the question is, how many airplanes actually see design limit load 100 times in their lifetime? And the answer is not hardly anyone. Then we did the final load case, which is 5.7 Gs. That's your ultimate condition in 20% increments. And everything was run through a computer, and we simultaneously measured load, strains, displacements, all simultaneously. Now, next slide. This is 2 pictures showing the test specimen sort of dolled up a little bit. And all those wire bundles go to strain gauges, which were installed on the torque tube. There were a total of 12, 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, on the right-hand side, 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, on the left-hand side. And those gauges were oriented, the center gauge was oriented to be parallel with the torque tube. That would measure the bending strain. The ones on each side of the center gauge were at 45 degrees, and those can be used to determine the shear load on the torque tube. So we're measuring bending stresses, or strains actually, bending strains and torsional strains, because it's a combined load condition. Now on the picture on the right, there's 2 aluminum collars. Those had to be machined to fit the OD of the torque tube, had the holes drilled in, so I had to buy some long bolts, and the outside of those collars fit on the inside of a large diameter 3-inch ID aluminum tube. We happen to have that in stock, so I borrowed it. Next slide, test setup. The test setup was done on our test frame, and it was done in the vertical plane. In other words, nose up. And you can see on the right-hand picture, you should be able to see that the bearing fitting is bolted to an aluminum plate, and we clamp that to an I-beam. You can see the large diameter pipe and that's where the load was introduced. On the left-hand picture, there's a long beam, and we had used that on a previous test setup, and that long beam is attached to the two ends of the round tubes, and then that test beam is then hooked up through a load cell to a servo-controlled hydraulic cylinder. And the red straps are to sort of float that beam. In other words, we didn't want to have that beam dragging on the I-beam. So we supported it so it was free to swing. Next slide, test setup. On the left picture, you get to see the hydraulics cylinder, the beam, and the test setup. On the right-hand picture, you'll see all these long tubular things, and those are LVDTs, linear voltage displacement transducer. So we measured in this picture the amount of bending displacement, and the top one, the top LVDT sitting against that small block, that's measuring how much twist. And we're getting ready to run the test now. Oh, here's another picture. Oh, here on the left-hand picture, you'll see how the beam is attached to the large diameter tube through a rod end, but you can see the offset is correct to give the torsional effect. And when the test was running, you could actually see this thing move. The right-hand picture is a load cell mounted to the vertical I-beam through a load cell, and I attached it where the cables go. That load cell now measures the reaction due to the applied load through the cylinder. Okay, case one load. Let's see, it's 1,760 pounds bending on the tube, and the reaction at that load cell, just on the previous slide on the right, is 200 pounds. So we've got the combination just right. Okay, strain data. Now, when you multiply modulus of elasticity by the strain, you get your PSI and stress. So it's 41.9 KSI, 1,525 microstrain. It gives us roughly 42 KSI at design limit load. Now, keep in mind that 4130 has a yield strength of 60 KSI, and an ultimate strength of 90 KSI. That's straight out of Mill Handbook 5. So you can see at design limit load, Piper designed this to have a fairly low stress. Okay, displacements. This is in 1/1000ths increments, so it moved about a quarter of an inch, and you could see the quarter of an inch displacement. Load case 2 loads, and load case 2. Now, load case 2 was the cycling condition, and we ran it at 1,800 pounds to get the 200-pound reaction at the control arm where the cable goes. Case 3 strains, about the same, and basically the results are similar to what we did on the static case, where we incremented in 20% increments. This is now the cycling part. So we took a snapshot of one of the cycles, and here's a combination. Number of cycles was actually 105, but you can see every one of those, you can see all the little ups and downs. That was a load cycle. And load case 3 is the ultimate condition, and which is 5.7 Gs, and we applied a load of 25 pounds and got a 300-pound reaction. So at this condition, on the next chart is strains. Everything is still linear elastic. We haven't even gotten to the 2% offset or yield point yet. It's linear elastic up to ultimate condition, which, if you think about it now, the ultimate condition now is about 3,000 microstrain. Let's see, and that was strain gauge 5. That would be a torsion condition. Strain gauge 5. 3. No, that's a bending stress, and that's in compression. We're not quite at elastic proportional limit, or about there. What I'm trying to tell you is the ultimate strength of the torque tube is still 1.5 times away. In other words, if you wanted to fail the torque tube in flight, you'd have to pull about 8.5 Gs. And I don't think anybody should want to do that or even try that out. And here we have displacements. We got 0.3 of an inch. Yeah, during that, you could watch it. And everything was captured. I have a CD of everything, photos, all the loads, the displacements, the strength, everything was captured on a computer, and I have a CD of that. The result is, the summary is what Mike Rohr considered a unserviceable assembly, tested to design limit load, tested to design ultimate load. It looked crummy. It was pitted. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with that torque tube. Eventually, I was in contact with the FAA in Atlanta while the test was actually running. I think at about 50 cycles, I called Atlanta. And they agreed with me that this is a maintenance issue, not an airworthiness issue. Eventually it became, if you got it, fix it. It's maintenance. AD not required. Piper service letter says inspect for torque tube corrosion every 10 years. There's no AD pending, no AD issued. It's a done deal. Now, I'd like to give you some opinions. The reason this presentation was only done once, back in 2007, and I think the information that I collected here is sufficiently important that Comanche owners really should know what was done, give them confidence that their torque tube is over-designed. Now, it may be over-designed due to stress. It may be the result of stiffness. It's hard to tell. But the reserve margin of those torque tubes, even if they're pitted, rusted, yada, yada, they're not going to fail. I'm going to offer an opinion up. A lot of people want to go to the Australian horn, which is not a bad thing. I've heard reports, and I've seen quotes, that when they send it into one of the main shops that does this kind of work, oh, you need new bearings and you need a new torque tube. And all of a sudden, you're looking at a price tag of over $3,500. And my feeling is it's up to the owner to make this decision, but the torque tube is fine. Just clean it up. The bearings hardly move. You know, the maximum is what, -4 degrees up, 8 degrees the other way. They barely move. The problem with the bearings is they have 50-year-old grease in them, which is hardened up, and it makes the bearing feel extremely rough. Since I don't have a camera, you can pop the bearing out of the bearing block real easy. You rotate it 90 degrees, you squeeze the bearing a little bit, it'll pop right out. You take your dental pick, you take out the snap rings, both sides, you take out the dust seal, both sides, you soak it in acetone overnight. The bearing will just, all of the grease in the bearing will dissipate. You clean it up, repack it, put on the dust seal, the snap rings, pop it into the bearing block, it'll snap in, rotate it 90 degrees, now you're back in business. So as an owner, you can make your own decision, but people are asking to replace stuff that is serviceable, is basically the main message here. I've done this to the bearings, I've done this, I've proven that the torque tube is not going to fail. I don't know what else to do. That concludes the formal part of the presentation. We'll answer questions as much time as we can have. If you want to see the presentation over again on your own, go to my website, hdneubert.com. There's a column called presentations. It's on the left-hand side. Look at it at your leisure. Thank you everyone for showing up. 121 participants. That's phenomenal. I want to thank everyone.
Yeah, so
I can unmute now.
I'm just going through the chat line here. Someone would like to know about the cracking on the trunnions. It's not the bolt. If there's some YouTube videos with a camera mounted underneath the wing and making a good is due to wheel spin up, the gear bounces back. You've got a compression on the tire and spin up loads on the wheel. It'll move forward or backwards, and then it'll snap forward. And when it snaps forward, that hole is in tension. And you can only get cracks in metals in tension. So it's really a function of wheel spin up, how many landings have been made hard and stuff like that. Matt Kirk has published how to treat that, and you basically bevel the edges to get rid of sharp edges, and I have a book, Peterson's stress concentration factor. And on a hole like that, under that load, the concentration factor is 2. So whatever stress is there, the concentration at that hole is double what it is elsewhere in that web. Enlarging the hole a little bit is not going to solve the problem. You got to get rid of sharp edges. Polish that hole on the edges and in the bore. You want to have a very smooth surface. Okay, Tom McKim.
So Hans, to make it easier, because I'm also getting texts with questions, what I'll do is just run down the list from the top so that they go in order. And I just wanted to also just say thank you. There is nobody else that could have done that, and we are grateful for your service to the type. Nobody else had the skills and access to the resources to bring science to bear on what was really an impending AD on the type. So I know I speak for many, many people in saying thank you. Larry, he said he'd, and I think you just answered this, that he'd like to know more about the oleo cracking issue and its preventative measures. It was suggested, and I wondered about increasing slightly the diameter of the bracket hole. Are the stresses due to that bolt or hole or independent of it? Might there be an alternative method of bracket that would not need to bolt through the web? And Larry, do you want to augment or add anything to that before Hans responds?
Thank you very much. No, I think that was the question that we were discussing today.
Well, as I described, the cracking of those depends on how many bad landings have occurred, is the easiest way to put it. Mm-hmm. Well, during landing, you have wheel spin up, you have friction from the runway pushing the entire oleo back, the wheel assembly back, and then if you watch the videos that are posted on YouTube, it'll snap forward. When it snaps forward, that hole is in tension, and the hole is a stress concentration factor on that web. The only way you would be able to mitigate is adding material around that hole, and maybe that can be done by bonding some aluminum in there or something. I don't know. I haven't dealt with that problem, but it's a stress problem due to the spin up load and then the reaction where it goes forward before it comes back to neutral.
Okay, if we were able to eliminate that hole, would it solve any cracking problem in the current designed web, or is the web undersized?
I think the web is okay, but anytime you have a hole, composite or metal, you got a stress concentration factor. So yeah, if you can get rid of the hole, then the problem goes away.
Okay, what I was wondering about is, would it be possible to redesign that bracket so it kind of clamps around the whole strut, but not going through that web? Perhaps it could clamp to it, both parts of itself.
No, I don't. The hole it's the hole that's the problem, not what you're attaching through it.
Right, but then you could fill in the hole, or is it too late because the hole is already in the web?
What are you going to fill it with?
Well, I don't know. You just said if you could put some additional aluminum in there or something.
Well, I don't know. I'd have to look at. I haven't thought about that, but
okay.
But it might be possible. Let's just say. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying we need to look at that.
Okay. No, it came up for discussion at the local airport. We've got about 4 Comanches on the field, plus a very good shop that has a real good Comanche expert there. And we were kind of shooting the breeze on how we could solve this thing or potentially solve it.
Well, the solution is to get rid of the hole.
Okay.
Well, what about putting a doubler on the hole?
Well, maybe. I would probably, the way I'd look at it is I'd probably have to make a finite element model, a detailed one with solid elements, put the hole in, and then apply loads and see what we get, and then start looking at alternatives. That's a lot of work, by the way.
John Futter had asked, what bolts should be in there replacing the AN5? John, any elaboration? Or
I had taken mine off and put the Australian horn in, and it seems to me I had seen AN5s in there. I'll have to go back and look, but I was wondering, should I have something else in there?
Separately, on another experiment on a horn, that was subjected to a little over 5.5 years of salt solution, which is a means of accelerating stress corrosion cracking. I used, good stuff. I used a grade 8 bolt, and that bolt, much to my surprise, did not corrode. A grade 8 bolt is 150 KSI, AN5s are 100.
Okay, and Hunter has a single fork question, even though it's off topic. And Matthew, we are coming back to yours for sure. So Hunter, go ahead. Fred Eisert said he replaced his torque tube years ago. It had minor corrosion, however, the diameter was undersized. The Piper spec on diameter seems impossible to achieve. As an IA, how do we determine the airworthiness if below diameter?
On the one chart where I showed my measurements, I posted the Piper requirements. Now here's a problem with the Piper. They have to do a mill run, and that's 1,300. Then it's centerless ground to the right diameter. Then they cut it with an abrasive cutoff saw. You know, with abrasive wheel. They slice the tubes in a 2-foot. Anytime you've either done it, cut any round thing with an abrasive tool, you know that it gets super hot. The middle, it goes quick, and then the end of the cut, it takes all that extra time to get out around.
Fred Eisert, did that answer your question?
He was kind of broken up there, but it sounded like the tube is a little bit out of round. I mean, I just look at the spec and Piper says minus 0.0002 inches. And I'm wondering if the tube ever met the spec to start with.
I mean, it did. Well, the tube in the long ground, the 12-foot, 55-foot piece of tubing probably was met the spec. But when you cut it with an abrasive wheel, a cutoff saw with an abrasive disc, you're going to heat the entry side and you're going to heat the exit side.
Yeah.
And that much heat warps the tube.
Okay.
That's the problem. What they should have been using is a carbide tip chipper blade. A chipper blade, it does it cold and it just chips its way through the tube. That way it stays round.
Anybody with kids, you are going to need to mute again, I'm afraid. So from Chris's iPad, will corrosion-resistant bolts in the horn use galvanic corrosion? Chris, anything to add to that?
Yeah, when I installed the Aussie horn, I bought through Kristen actually a set of corrosion-resistant bolts for that entire assembly. Not only the horn to the tube, but the bearing blocks to the bulkhead. I'm just wondering if that reduces galvanic corrosion.
It should. It's not eliminate corrosion. Anti-corrosion bolts they're not corrosion free. How's that? But it should eliminate the corrosion.
I know you had mentioned 10 years is a good idea. I just wonder if that buys me more time.
No, if you've got corrosion bolts going through everything, I think you're fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
From Eric.
Kristen here has got a comment on that, if you've got a sec.
Go for it, Kristen.
I'm wondering if they've changed the Aussie horn, because I haven't done one in a couple of 3 years, but I've done a couple of them, and my recollection was that bolt was dash 34 length, where the regular Piper one was dash 33. And then the two I did, I managed to run down some AN 175 C dash 34As, which were the corrosion resistant. But it was not easy finding those. And I kind of thought the ones I'd sent Chris were the -33s, and I'm wondering if they had changed the Aussie horn to accept the -33s, which would have made more sense.
I've only installed one Aussie horn, so I'm not up to speed on bolt lengths. But if you think you had a hard time finding corrosion resistant bolts, try finding titanium bolts. That eliminates the problem. But as far as the dash length of the bolts on a Piper horn versus Aussie horn, I'm not up to date on that. And Eric, no.
I don't know, Kristen, but what you sent worked, so they were the right length.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're going to use the grade 8 bolts, is there a coating or electroplating that can be used to ensure that there's no corrosion on them? I mean, like if you use like the spray can of the zinc chromate, would that work, or do the electroplating, zinc chromate electroplating on it?
The grade 8 bolts that I used on the horn that was in the bath, it came with a shellac coating, and I just installed it. And when I took the horn out of the bath, everything, there was a lot of crud on that horn. After bead blasting, those bolts are pristine.
Yeah, go figure.
Okay, oh, interesting.
The original bolts corroded. The grade 8 bolts survived the 3% salt solution bath unscathed. Is that right, Hans?
Say that again.
I said the original bolts suffered corrosion in the 3% salt solution bath. The grade 8 bolts with their shellac coating emerged unscathed. Is that just to read it back? That's what you said?
Yeah, remember on the horn that I showed that was all eaten up?
Yep.
Those were grade 8 bolts, and they look pristine.
Huh,
interesting.
Huh.
So where do you get the grade 8 bolts? Home Depot?
Well,
yeah.
No, there's a place here in SoCal called McFadendale. It's a big hardware store.
Okay.
But you should
Do grade 8 bolts? Do grade 8 bolts come in various flavors, or is it just grade 8 is grade 8? I mean, do they come with coatings or something like that?
No, it's just grade 8.
Okay.
The difference is they don't have dash numbers. They go by fractional increments. So to get one that has the full grip, the grip length that goes through the horn, you'd probably have to buy a 3-inch long, and then on grade 8 bolts, they usually have more threads than what you need.
From Mark, actually, does that answer Eric's question?
One question for you, Hans, on follow-up here. This is Kristen. What's the FAA's view going to be of sticking a pair of grade 8 bolts in the tail of the Comanche as opposed to AN hardware?
Well, all I'm doing is pointing out that in one test, a grade 8 bolt showed no corrosion at all. The recommendation is just use AN5s and replace them every 10 years. Unless you go with a corrosion resistant bolt, AN5C, I think it is.
So, okay, cool. This is going into some pretty interesting areas. Mark Sullivan had a question. In 2008, his Twinco developed a play at the stabilator tip. The bolt holes have become ever so minimally enlarged, but that caused play that you could feel at the stab tip. I still do not understand how the bolt holes could have become enlarged. Replace the tube with new old stock from Webco. 12 years later, they're still sound. Mark, did you want to add anything before Hank responds? Before Hans responds?
Yeah, I've often wondered whether or not there was any way I could have refurbished that tube, because now they're getting kind of precious. It wasn't back then. And it was perfect. After, 40 years, it was in perfect shape. Just for some instrumentality caused the bolt holes to get, you could barely measure the difference being off, but it was enough to cause substantial play you could feel at the stabilator tip.
Okay.
And so I got a torque tube sitting there in the hangar, and I often wondered, can this be reconditioned?
Okay, these are the bolts that go through the stabilator into the torque tube.
Correct.
This is a problem that's been discussed at length for a long, long time. And the concern is taking those bolts out often, like every 5 years. The bolt threads can actually broach those bolts if you're not careful. That's the problem. Those threads, when you tap those bolts out, because it's such a tight fit, the bolt thread has an opportunity to broach the hole and basically enlarge it.
Yeah, getting those bolts in, I mean, you have to be very patient because it's a very tight fit.
Yes,
and
they are.
The airplane, I bought the airplane from a guy who was a maintenance freak, and he probably did take that off repeatedly. So that explains how the play got started. And then I owned it about 8 years, and it finally got noticeable. Interestingly, though, that with a tiny amount of broaching of the hole,
yes,
developed very noticeable play at the tip to the point it was obviously dangerous.
If it gets, how much play did you get?
I really couldn't measure it. You could feel it. If you grab the tip, and it was like you could feel it, just move a tiny amount, whereas it shouldn't move at all. It should be rock solid.
Yeah, that's.
And I've gotten to the point now that, like, every pre-flight after a long flight, I go back and grab the stabilator, and I've done that in other people's airplanes, and I felt play in them. So it's not uncommon.
What sort of motion are you getting on that? Is it a lateral motion or
No,
longitudinal?
Go up and down. Just go at the end of the tip, put your hand under it, and just lift, and just see if you feel play. And it'll feel like almost oil canning. It'll go click, 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 click. Just it's magnified dramatically at the stab tip.
Well, the bolts don't really hold that way, do they?
I think they must, because I changed the torque tube and play gone. Torque tube, new bolts, play. And the torque tube that came out looks really good. And the bolts look really good. It must be just a tiny amount.
Hans has got me scared because I pull my stabilators off every year to inspect the horn. And maybe I shouldn't do that.
That's not a good idea.
But I would recommend go back and take the stabilator underneath it, and you see if there shouldn't be any play at all. And I remember in the 90s, I don't know why, maybe when I found this, I don't know when I first discovered this, I talked to Maurice about it before he passed on somebody else's airplane. He was the one that said there should be zero play. If you feel any, fix it.
Have you checked the rivets on the corner blocks inside the fuselage?
Oh, yes. I replaced those a long time ago.
Okay, so those are tight.
Yeah, those are good.
All right.
Good discussion. Just kicking in order, Tom just said this is off topic, but for anybody with Ray J turbos, the FAA just approved a life extension for 5 to 10 years with a commitment to a terminating action after in-service reports are provided when using Ray J specific PMA hoses. Press release to follow later this week. Thanks for the public service announcement, Tom.
So you have to, if you have the good hoses, would you have to have them recertified by Tom Langland's group, or have to replace them even though they're lifetime hoses?
Tom, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. It had to be the Ray J PMA specific hoses. So any hoses you have on your airplane now would not qualify, regardless of whether they're Type D, Type C, fire sleeved, or anything like that.
Well, thank you for doing that. It's the dumbest AD ever.
What about the AD on the tail horn, on the rescinding that? Wasn't that a question?
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that in fact the dumbest AD?
Right.
Yeah, that one's probably the dumbest. The Ray J one's close, though. It's real expensive and real unnecessary.
I think we're going to be returning to the tailhorn AD. We are still continuing to collect information to bring to, and we'll bring it to the FAA when ready, and Hans is part of that effort. Hans, anything you want to add to that?
No, I'm working the problem, but it's a lot of effort is going into that. The intent is to get a revision to the AD. We're not going to eliminate it. We're asking for a revision. How far we can go is TBD.
Another question from Larry. Can you just shellac your AN? Aren't grade A bolts less elastic than AN specs? Grade
Well,
A. rather.
I'm just saying when I bought the grade A bolts, they had shellac on them. That's not important. The shellac is just a treatment. It doesn't do anything. The AN bolts and grade 8 bolts have different steel alloy, different type of steel that they use. And it appears to me that an AN bolt is more susceptible to galvanic corrosion than a grade 8. That's all I'm really telling you. And less elastic, well, it's modulus driven, so they both are at 27.5 to 28 million Young's modulus, so that doesn't change the elasticity. You got to think of Young's modulus.
Eric said, are you sure you don't know anyone who can pull 200 pounds on the yoke? Like when you're flying with your pet gorilla, for example?
Hans, a longtime listener, first time caller here. You sure you don't know anyone who is strong enough to pull, say, 200 pounds on the yoke?
Yes, I know you can do it.
Yeah, you know.
Don't you even think of trying to do that?
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, sounds like it.
Good evening, Hans.
For Eric, for everyone's benefit, Eric is my son.
I'm also the one who's flying 3-1 Yankee for the most part, so I make sure that the maintenance is kept up by the owner-operator.
Yeah.
You know, as another second generation Comanche pilot, I'm just curious, out of the remaining, we had, by the way, over 126 people logged on simultaneously at peak. I wasn't checking all the time, but it was a big group tonight. I have to say, it is clear we are all pilots because we managed to not step on each other when we were all unmuted, and all the background noise was incidental. So you can't get that out of most groups. Of the remaining 51 of us here, I'm just curious how many of us are second generation, because the Comanches are so popular, they seem to stay in families. I know if Marty Miesco's still here. Hunter, go ahead.
Third generation.
Marty Miesco's daughter Marina soloed recently, so that's another one. All right, so
but my
This
son
is
also
Robert
does.
Klein. I just wondered if you have any future presentations that maybe you'd like to give in a couple of months and what topics it might be on.
Well, in a couple of months, we should be closer on the horn issue. That might be something. I'm open to suggestion though. What's important to everyone?
Speed mods.
Oh, you want to go fast like me?
Nobody goes fast like you.
Well, the first thing, the thing you have to understand is I have most of the speed mods everyone else has, and they add up. I mean, it's not what is advertised, but they add up. The most speed I got out of the airplane is cooling drag, and that's something no vendor deals with. No vendor has any. Well, you can get a couple of, the Fristy cow or the Dave Pratt cow. And they do report some speed gains. The other thing is, and I reported this on the Delphi site, I have velocity stacks, and I produce more horsepower. And a velocity stack it's like a curved funnel. And what that does is, and I referenced my reference that I use for that on Delphi, and that is, imagine a bathtub or sink that has a sharp-edged exit drain. And when you pull the stopper out, you'll see that the water constricts, and the constriction is due to the sharp edge. If you put a curved, and the ratio is radius of the curve divided by the radius of the hole, should be 0.2. That'll give you 100% efficiency. And if you were to do that on a sink, you would get the full diameter draining that water. Right now, you only get 2/3. So the first thing I would look at is if you have a carburetor that's a little more difficult, you've got a 250 there. Anyway, I have that on my engines, and I produce 12 to 14 more horsepower at takeoff than any other naturally aspirated twin. The second thing is you don't have cowl flaps, and you have a stock cowl with a stock exit, and I see you have a small nose tire. That's going to slow you down. And the way to fix that is If you had a standard tire and you retract it, what's the gaposis of the tunnel against the tire? And now when you put the small tire in there, you have a bigger gap. And my feeling is you want to have something that closes that gap to what you had before, because you're drawing too much air in. That cooling drag is air is coming into the cowling. It has to come to a stop. That means like going in a car at 120 miles an hour and you put your hand out in the wind, and you bring the air to a stop. That's a lot of force, and that's cooling drag. So with singles, the problem is I would work on cooling drag if I had a single. Now the guy are you ready for this? Charlie Horton is a good friend of mine. He has a 400. He's got the fastest 400 in the country. His wife has a 180. He's been experimenting with her airplane, and she cruises at 160 knots in a 180. Charlie is a wizard at speed mods for singles. So most the 250s, 260, most of them, the standard speed, I think, is somewhere around 165 knots. Some of the tricked out ones, I think, go to 170. A fully tricked out single with everything taken into account, you might get it to, 175, 178 knots, but that's going to take a lot of work. Not an easy job.
You've also mentioned that rigging is really important too.
Well, that's the first thing I do, is always the rigging. Rigging is first, baffle sealing the cowling is second, and full retraction of the gear is third. If you don't do those three, you're wasting your time. My rigging is such, I have a digital torpedo level. I'm within 1/10 of a degree everywhere. It's that important.
Hans, on a turbo twin 1969, what kind of speeds should I be looking at about 5,000 feet?
Turbo twins don't go fast down low.
Okay, that's
you're getting induction loss.
I'm finding that my friend's single Comanche 260 is actually faster than my twin.
Yes.
By about 2 miles an hour at 5,000 feet.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Okay, I'm not disappointed then.
Now, do you know how? Now, just to give you a data point, now I'm naturally aspirated. I don't have turbos.
Right.
But I cruise at 182 knots at 8,500.
What I've got to do is get this twin up high enough to where I can actually kick in the turbos and see what it'll do.
Exactly. And you can have no leaks of any kind anywhere in the turbo system.
The wastegate mainly is what you're talking about.
Yeah. And hoses and stuff like that. You can have leaks.
This is Tom with Ray J. Really, it could be the hoses. It could be the alternate air door, the gaskets, seals. Compressor discharge box also has seals on it.
Tom knows those are all new.
What's that?
Tom, this is Bob. I bought all those parts from you a little over a year
hey,
ago.
Bob. Awesome. Well, then that's not the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Real quick, just to answer your question, when the FAA, I have test data from the FAA back in the 1960s. They had to prove essentially all performances as good or better than in all scenarios. That's why there's no different performance charts on any of the Ray J modified products. So yeah, there may be some kind of induction loss at some point, but it's essentially not even measurable in the eyes of the FAA. And I can assure you that if there's any kind of measurable difference that would affect any kind of performance, truly, it would have had different performance charts. So it'd be hard pressed to put any kind of value on it. They even did air pressure tests inside the induction systems and proved that there was no pressure loss. I think it was like possibly 0.1 inches, something of that nature. That's just some data that I have. Yeah.
I have a question from Joe, and this came up last week as well, which is with the passing of Bruce at S&B. And Joe, just bear with me for a second while I bring your question back. Is there any other option for repairing the web? And so the question, did that make sense? And Joe, do you have anything to add to that question before Hans responds?
Let's see, is it on the topic here?
It is really, I think, a question more about the strut housings. Is that, Joe, is that correct? You won't. It was actually
That's
sent to me.
correct. The cracks in the web on the main strut housings, if they're only a quarter of an inch long, is there an option for repairing those now that S&B is out of business?
If I were to experiment, what I would need a cracked unit. I would then try to weld up the hole. Now the problem with welding is you lose the heat treat, but you get some of that back. And this is true with 6061 and a bunch of other alloys that are weldable, easily weldable, let's put it that way. I don't know how much you would lose in heat treat if you welded up that hole. And maybe there are means to determine heat treat using eddy current. It would require a little experimentation, is the point I'm making. For example, if you weld 6061, which is a very common alloy, and the original compression strength is 32 KSI. If you weld it, you get about 28 KSI back, just due to the aging process. You gain on one and lose on the other is the point. But, you know, is that enough to make a difference? I don't know. I've never really explored that.
I think I know of a member who actually does eddy current testing for a living, and I don't know if it's the right kind, but I suspect if this got put onto the list of to-dos and we could fund it, that we might get some contributions. It's a good question because it's an important area.
Yeah, I'm not a metallurgist, so you know, you're stretching me a little bit here.
Matthew, there is a link to Hans posting. Oh, on Delphi. Matthew, is your question related to the presentation that Hans just gave?
No, I was curious about the velocity stacks and the other speed mods that were referenced earlier. You know, in the continuing search to make my Comanche faster.
In fact, too bad I don't have a camera. I'd put this up on the screen. It's
Well, while you're looking, Hans, let me ask you this. I've got a commitment from Zach, and I will check with Charlie and Melanie, but they were extremely helpful to. So I was going to be flying the Air Race Classic in a twin Comanche with Helen Miller, JJ Miller's daughter, who's I think may still be our youngest twin co-driver. And Charlie gave us a whole tutorial on how to go win that race in the twin. So that's why I'm hoping he'll say yes. But everybody post or text or whatever on who you think should come in the Make Our Comanches Go Really Fast session, and we'll put it together, because clearly you all are like, make this session happen. That said, Hans, if you want, we will bring you back and we'll make sure that there's a working camera. I know Eric is committed.
Yeah,
So,
we'll get that up. I'd like to make a correction. I have my reference here. The radius of the inlet divided by diameter is 0.2, not radius to radius. It's the radius of the curve of the curved inlet to the diameter should be 0.2. And if you do that, the flow coefficient is 99%.
I'm not. I'm assuming there's probably not too much that can be done there on the singles with the original cowling, right? The inlet is pretty huge.
actually, for that, the Eagle cowling and is still available, and
Well-
that really is remarkable. I mean, the 260, the 250 I flew with an Eagle cowl was really remarkably fast and efficient. The knots to you, unfortunately, is not available anymore. And does anybody else know of other things? I wish Zach were here because he's sort of the single guy.
Yeah, Zach has a cowling that he's referenced on the Facebook group. I don't remember what it's called, but it's not the Eagle cowling.
Is it less than 15 grand?
I don't think there's such thing.
I know the Eagles are expensive.
I spent my money on the Electro Air, and avionics are next, so cowling's
Yay.
probably last.
That's probably a better way to spend it. A Lepesti cowling back when it was available was more than 15 grand.
I do have the three bladed prop that's supposed to go with that cowling, but previous owner never sprung for the cow.
Yeah, the 3-bolt prop has a negative addition to speed, so you're actually hurting yourself there.
I know.
But boy, do you climb like a son of a gun.
I do.
It climbs really good.
Yeah. So Chris had a question. He said, since we're back on trunnions, why does the left side crack more frequently than the right?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I know you said it's the consequence of hard landings, but it would seem to me both sides would crack equally frequently if that were the case. I know it's come up on.
The right gear has a hole with nothing in it, and the left gear has the squat switch with a bolt through. So an open hole is going to give you more concentration effect than if you had a bolt in there, especially if the bolt was tight. The whole idea is if the stress concentration is 2, what can you do to reduce that stress concentration? And normally in joints, we add doublers or increase the thickness or increase the width. So one possibility to getting rid of is to, let me just speak freely. I would get some really good structural adhesive, clean up the area around the hole, and I would add a tapered in thickness doubler around that entire hole and bolt it up. And the idea being, I'm trying to transfer stresses to the tapered doublers, which is going to be like a tapered washer, using bonding and bolting to reduce the total stress. That's how we do. Whenever we got a stress concentration problem, you add either thickness, a doubler, or something.
Hans, just 2 things. Mark Sullivan has offered you his Twinco strut with a tiny leak to test with. So that's a public service offer. It seems like there's a lot of interest. And then let's see, Dwight Kroom's got a question, but before I go there, it's 8:57. This meeting is being recorded and we'll be converting and posting. So the Q&A is here. We had sort of promised to stop at 9, but I think I just want to check with our hosts. Can you guys leave this up and then let the recording spool later? That would be for particularly for Bernie and for let's see who took over recording. Bernie Stump, are you there?
I am, and I'm the only one recording at the present time. Pete Morse is not present.
That's right. That's because he's in the process of processing so that we can convert to post the recording. Are you able to stay up a bit longer to allow this meeting to continue?
No problem.
Thank you very much. Okay, sorry everybody. I know people want to be able to come back and find this data. Back to the Dwight Coombs question. He said, you mentioned cooling drag, and I have a 260 with a cool running number 5 cylinder and a hot running number 6, which is interesting because usually it's number 5 that's hot. I want to improve cooling on 6 and warm up 5 and reduce cooling drag. Who can best help me with this? Dwight, anything to add before Hans responds?
No, it's just been my puzzlement. The first 4 cylinders are excellent, and I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear, right?
But I've had trouble with number 5 being cool, and that's the only cylinder I've ever had to take off and have serviced. Number 6 will run almost 400 degrees in cruise at 65% power, and it's my best cylinder. I'd like to get them all, in high 380s, they're like 380 area or something like that. I'm not sure what's the best, but my other cylinders are running like 380. 5 is running like 350 or less, and 6 is running almost 400.
Well, first of all, you need to understand cooling drag is a black art. On my airplane, I've done the baffle seals 4 times, trying to improve it and get it better. One thing I noticed when I had the engines overhauled, I had the baffles all cleaned up and powder coated and they look sexy. The fit behind cylinder number 4, where the oil cooler is, now I know your oil cooler is up front, I believe, but the fit of that baffle on the engine side had a huge gap. And I mean, like a 3/8 of an inch. I said, wow, you cannot have leaks like that anywhere. The rule of thumb.
I don't. I have all tight to the cylinder fins.
Okay. Here's what I'd like to have you try. Turn off the lights in the hangar. Maybe have an assistant with a flashlight, and go around every part of that engine looking for holes. In other words, if can you get light to come through? And whatever, if you find a hole, seal it. RTV it's shut. That's the key.
Okay.
The second thing is with the cowling on, look through the inlets and follow with a flashlight the sealing of the rubber seal all the way around.
Yes, done that.
Sometimes you get a little buckle and it makes a little hole for the air. So it's just
okay.
Finesse. It's finesse and attention to detail.
As far as how the air flows, I know the guys at Tornado Alley had started doing some work about how the air flows, and they put some video cameras in on top of the engine and had little bits of string on everything. And they were amazed at how the air flows so much around the outside, towards the cylinder head, the fastest and the most. And then at the low pressure in the center, right back towards the spinner.
Yeah, I've done that too. And it's amazing. The air just turbulates around in there. Actually, it actually makes 2 racetracks. It circulates in a
right.
And the second thing is the cylinders are considered 50% porous. They're like a sieve, but it's 50%. So as the air goes in, only a certain amount gets past the cylinders. And on
right.
the Comanches, the stock cowling lets way too much air in. That's one of the problems. And if you look at the Lopresti or Dave Pratt cowling, they don't have big areas going in. They have moderate area, where the stock Comanche has this huge hole that's shoving air in.
Right.
And that's going to be a problem. I started on a nose bowl long ago. It's sitting in my hangar of creating a single round hole nose bowl. People don't need the whole cowl. All they want is the nose bowl. And I never got around to finishing that. But that would be one of the first things, if I had a single, one of the first things I'd work on is getting a new nose bowl.
If something like that was designed, though, what's it going to take to get it approved?
You have to do some flight tests. You have to have thermocouples on your mags, your fuel pump, all your accessories, and stuff like that. Now, on my right engine, I have 10 thermocouples over there. It's not as bad as you think. How's that?
So the big thing is monitoring temperatures under different circumstances to prove that nothing's getting too hot.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's called equivalent level of safety. You start out with what you got, make measurements, and then you work on a new nose bowl, put it on, and you see what you got afterwards. And if you're equivalent or better, that'll work out to your favor.
I'd like to talk about this maybe another time. I don't want to monopolize the time here, if you don't mind.
I think people are interested. Go ahead, Kristen.
I'm just going to point out that 400 CHT on a Lycoming is not a big deal. I mean, I've run engines from 0 hours to TBO, at those kinds of temperatures and never had a problem with it. So I know it's a big deal for savvy Mike Bush, but he's a Continental guy. That is pretty hot for a big bore Continental, but Lycomings handle those kind of temperatures. I don't get too excited until they're up over 104 1/4. Kind of where I'm at.
I agree. I think it's more that I want to try to warm up number 5. Number 5 has been my only trouble cylinder, and number 6 is the one that's hot is my least problem cylinder. So I agree with you. And you're right. The Continentals would start melting at like 380, I think. So yeah, stick with the Lycoming.
Zach once said that Lycomings have this wonderful feature, which is that if they're going to start to have a problem, they kind of clear their throats a little bit and give you a clear sign. And then if you ignore it, they might shrug and wiggle around a little bit. And then if you ignore that, then they'll punch you in the face. But they give plenty of warning.
Yeah.
When I went into manual, I had a cold cylinder, and it wound up to be the probe. So don't skip over the obvious on this.
Yeah, I've done the switch the probes, and and it wasn't the probe. And that cylinder 5 is definitely running cold compared to the others, and it shows it when I've had to take it off and have some work done on it. But yeah, no, yeah, thank you. You're right.
All right. Just a voice from, like I say, I kind of got tricked on this past annual on that one.
It's a relief, isn't it, when you find out that it's a bad probe?
I think we want to cut this off now.
Okay.
I agree. Thank you so much for being here.